Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Who were you before the world told you who to be? That's the underlying question behind Glennon Doyle's new memoir, Untamed. Glennon is a speaker, activist, and New York Times bestselling author. Her two previous books, Love Warrior and Carry On Warrior, were both #1 New York Times bestsellers. Glennon is the founder of Together Rising, an all-woman-led nonprofit that has raised over $20 million for women, families, and children in crisis. She's been featured on Oprah's Super Soul Sunday, and Love Warrior was on Oprah's book club selection. Glennon lives in Florida with her wife, Abby Wambach, a retired soccer star, and 3 children. No topic is off limits to Glennon. She's written about addiction, recovery, marriage, and faith with no holds barred. In today's conversation, we dig into becoming attuned to our discontent, abandoning expectations, and learning to trust yourself. It's about how sometimes we forget who we are and how we find ourselves again. Let's get right to it. Here's my conversation with Glennon Doyle. Glennon Doyle, it is an absolute honor to have you on. We're going to have fun and we're going to keep it real. Does that sound good?
I mean, that sounds like my jam.
I know it's your jam. I know it's your jam. So we have to start here. Your previous memoir, Love Warrior, is the story, of redemption of your marriage to your husband at the time. And then in the midst of that, of your promoting it, right, you meet Abby Wambach. And so let's start there because tell me a little bit about that window of time. It's a lot to unpack, I know, but let's start there.
Yeah, so I think the best way to describe it is that I was in a bad marriage with a good man. And that is an interesting place for women to be because, I had the kind of life that women are trained to be grateful for, right? The kind of marriage that you're just supposed to say, this is good enough. But I don't know, I just always had this thing inside of me that was just questioning, is this as good as it gets?
Mm-hmm.
And just always felt kind of like, it was like this whisper that was like, isn't it supposed to be more beautiful than this? Right. And I felt kind of angry all the time. I was just kind of this low level rev rage. And then I was on the road promoting the book, Love Warrior, which was, by the way, like it was Oprah's book.
Right.
It was freaking all over the world. Just like, this is the epic marriage redemption story. Right.
Sure.
So, of course, everybody in my sphere, many people's work was connected to the success of that book. And the general idea was, okay, people will buy this book because they will want to save their own marriages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm at a event to promote Love Warrior, and Abby walks in the room. And it's so freaking cheesy, but the only way I know how to describe it is the truth, which is that I felt these 3 words rise inside me, and they were, there she is. And, I thought, okay, these words are coming to me from on high, right? I'm in the middle of some kind of freaking Disney moment, but I have come to know that those words were clearly from within, right? That I was just finally hearing loud and clear the voice of the girl I was before the world told me who to be, right? Before I started trying to contort myself to fit inside all of these boxes, like, here's what a good girl does, here's what a good Christian does, here's what a good woman does, here's what a good mother does. So, the next few months were scary and hard, but they were a journey trying to answer the questions like, okay, now that I've finally heard from myself, am I going to abandon myself again? Or am I going to finally abandon the world's expectations of me? It was really the difference between, am I going to keep being a good girl and slowly dying? Or am I going to be a free woman and just let it all burn? Let the world freaking deal and adjust.
But I love what you say, which is when you tell the truth, it always works, and it's worked for you. I mean, you told the truth, you leaned into that,
Yeah.
and it's worked.
Yeah, I mean, worked is something that usually you can look back on and say, in the end, it all worked, but it doesn't always feel that way when you're going through it.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure.
At no morning did I wake up during that time and say, this is just really working beautifully, right?
Sure,
This
I'm
is
sure
easy
I can.
peasy. People are just loving this, right? Like, it wasn't. It was hard, and people were upset and scared, and I broke a lot of people's hearts. I mean, I was taught that a good mother doesn't break her children's hearts. Right?
Yeah,
But
you talk about that.
I stayed in a less than healthy marriage for a long time because I thought, he's a good dad, and like my kids, I just can't break their hearts. And then one day I was braiding one of my daughter's hair, and we were kind of looking at each other in the mirror, and I thought, oh, I am staying in this marriage for her. But would I want this marriage for her? Right? And if I would not want this marriage for her, then why am I modeling bad love and calling that good motherhood?
That's a lot.
Yeah. So it was this shift of like, oh, I know why, because I have been trained, I've been tamed to believe that good mothers are martyrs. Right?
Sure.
That we just slowly disappear. We just bury ourselves, our desires, our emotions, our feel, everything. We bury it all, and we call that love. And that is just some crap that's been fed to us by status quo forever, because every message to every woman in every arena is just slowly disappear. That's how you earn your worthiness. So what I figured out is, okay, it's good to want to be a good mother, like being a good mother, being a good friend, all these things. I want to be those things, but I just better define good for myself.
Sure, absolutely.
Because if I keep swallowing status quo's definition of good, if I keep chasing that dirty pink bunny, I will succeed. But success for a woman inside of culture is disappear, be gone, become smaller and smaller in body, mind, spirit, ambition. So yes, it was hard, but it all worked in the end, because when we are true to ourselves, our outer world slowly transformed to become exactly what they're supposed to be. But it sure as hell wasn't easy. There was a lot of pain and fear and loss. Yeah. But I lost everything I was supposed to lose.
Yeah.
When you're being honest, you always lose the people and the things you are supposed to lose, so you can step into the next version of yourself.
Glennon, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, you've written about, addiction. You've written about infidelity, about your marriage, right? You just talked about that, about falling in love with a woman, and one of the things that came up for me is, what was the hardest thing for you to put out into the world? Because you put it out there, right? I mean, you are real, girl. What was the hardest, though?
Okay, so I've done a lot of interviews about this, and this is the first time I've talked about this concept. I'm so excited you asked me that, and also like sweating that you asked me that, because so there's this story in Untamed that I have never told anyone on earth except for Abby. Okay, not my sister, not my kids, not my ex-husband, like nobody. Okay, and it is like the cheesiest. Okay, so when I was in high school, I so badly wanted to be
falling in love
like
with
a popular girl. Okay, I just
You
wanted
just
to
talked about
belong.
that,
I
about
wanted to
falling in love
belong
with a
so
woman.
badly.
And one of the things that came
there
up
was
for
this
me is, what was the
this thing called
hardest thing for you
homecoming
to put
court
out
in high
into the
school,
world?
like where you could make it
All right,
onto
so
homecoming
hopefully
court,
that
like this
helps.
ridiculous, like proof of belonging, like proof of coolness, right? If you made it onto this homecoming court. And I was in the room counting votes for homecoming court. And Molly, I added 2 tick marks next to my name and cheated my way onto homecoming court to be nominated for homecoming court. Okay. Like,
wow.
I did that, Molly. I was so desperate to belong, so desperate to be cool, that I committed voter fraud to be on freaking homecoming court. And this story, like my wife, Abby, when I told her that I was going to include this story, she was like, oh, babe, You can't tell that one. Like you can. I'm like, honey, I've written about my abortions. I've written about my divorces. I've written about my addictions to drugs and alcohol. Like I can't. This is the thing that I can't write about. And we figured out like it is just so unacceptable to desperately want to be cool and not to be cool. Because all of these other things, like, yeah, I've been to jail. Yeah, I've been to blah, blah, blah. I have. But those things have a level of cool.
Right. Sure. Right.
What you can't admit to is being terribly, terribly uncool. And what I do know is that I'm a good leader and I'm a good activist and I'm a really good writer. And I'm incredibly uncool. Like,
I would argue that you're pretty cool, girl.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just like, I'm hot. I'm sweaty. I care too much. I care the most amount. And so I've just embraced my lack of cool. And I've thought, no, like you have to tell the story you cannot tell. Right? Because that's what keeps us caged.
No
is those
question.
little shameful things.
Yeah. No.
So there
question.
you have it. I committed voter fraud and got myself nominated to homecoming court. That is my greatest shame.
Oh my gosh. Well, and that's incredible because you have shared and you are so forthright in the things that you share that help so many people, which is fantastic. Tell me this. I mean, you talked a little bit about addiction just now and recovery obviously was a part of that for you. What has that taught you about honesty?
Well, recovery is completely about honesty, right? That's all of my art, everything I do, the way that I parent, the way that I show up in my marriage, the way that I lead, the way that I run Together Rising, all of it I learned in early sobriety, okay? Because being sober is my one thing, right? There's nothing else that matters. Everything beautiful in my life, all of it stems from my sobriety because, and I actually think that in lots of ways, we addicts are unlucky. And in lots of ways, we are really lucky because many of us hit rock bottom. And so we are forced to go through this spiritual process, which is recovery. And recovery is just the process of recovering your true self, right? And that is why a lot of people who have gone through sobriety and early recovery have a real sense of self, right? We are forced to go through that process where a lot of people don't have to. So what I learned in early sobriety is that all that matters is integrity, right? And integrity does not mean to me doing the right thing, because the right thing is relative and planted, whatever. It's different for everybody.
Sure, right.
What integrity means is being integrated, which means that your beliefs, your emotions, your imagination, your inner self, what I would call your untamed self, right, on the inside, aligns with your outer self, right? So your words and your actions and your way you are in the world is integrated with your inner self. That's what integrity means, right? Integrated. So I would use the word maybe integrity instead of honesty, but they're the same. It just means that we are constantly doing our best to bring our inner self to do the next right thing, one thing at a time, and letting circumstances do whatever they like. I'm not trying to keep the peace, right? I'm not trying to like not say this or do not be myself or not so that like everything can stay the same on the outside. I'm completely fine with bringing my true self to any situation and just letting the outer world reorganize itself and adjust based on what I've just brought. And I think that's the future that's what an untamed woman is. That's what our corporations and our churches and our families need to be encouraging, is this idea now that community is no longer about being quiet so that you don't rock the boat, right? Community now, belonging has to be this idea that no, when we come to the table, we bring our full selves to the table, trusting that when we do, we will be held by the group, but also free to be our individual selves.
Well, and in Untamed, it's about, you talk about finding your brave, right? And you define courage and freedom. Can you talk about how you define courage and how you define freedom a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, I do think that, brave is a buzzword for us, and we say be brave all the time. We tell ourselves to be brave. We tell our friends to be brave. We tell our kids to be brave. And then we have no freaking idea what brave means. Right. So and it's probably like, as a words person, it's super important to me to define what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Right. So I had this interesting experience where I was, playing with what brave means in my head, because I kept seeing mostly on memes, which is now where we get most of our important information. Right?
Yes.
I kept seeing this line that said, brave is being afraid and doing it anyway. Right. Which just didn't exactly feel right to me. So my kids are getting their ears pierced, right? I've got 2 daughters until they tell me otherwise, but for now they're still 2 daughters. And one of them is, so the first one, the older one, I raised her when I still cared about parenting, right? I was just really still had a lot of energy. With the last one, I just was like, oh my God, you're on your own, right? So I just gave her an iPad and just said, Godspeed, right?
How old are your kids?
Chase is 17, Tish is 14, and Emma's 11.
Got it. Okay.
So I take them to get their ears pierced, and the older one, she's hanging back, as she often does. She's more cautious. The younger one just runs up to the kiosk and jumps in the chair, and I finally make it there, and the woman turns to me, the piercer, and she says, "Is this your daughter? Are you her mother?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm trying to be. I've been trying to be for a very long time." And she said, Emma just looked at her and said, do it. So the lady, shot her ears up. Tish is watching this, the older one, and she turns to me and she says, Mom, no, I'm not ready. I changed my mind. I'm not ready to do this. And I said, are you certain? She said, yes. And I said, okay, wonderful. Tell the lady you're not going to go. So she told her. And an interesting thing happened, which is that the woman turned to Tish and she said, oh, come on, honey, be brave. Be brave like your sister. Look at your sister. She's so brave. And then a couple of the other mothers there, well-meaning, turned and said the same thing. Oh, come on, you can be brave. You can be brave like your sister. And Tish got, a little bit, you could see her kind of deflate. And I knew something was off, but of course I could not put my finger on it in the moment. So I said nothing except no, we're fine. We're going to go. This is what I realized later and what I said to my daughter. Brave is not what we've been saying brave is. Brave is not being afraid and doing it anyway. Because, by the way, if we tell our 9-year-olds that, then can we tell our 16-year-olds that? So when our 16-year-olds get in the car, they tell us they're going to a movie, right? But they're really going to the kegger down the street. Are we going to say, okay, kiddo, I want you to be brave tonight? And what I mean by that is if anyone's doing anything scary and you have a gut instinct that says, no, I want you to just plow through that and just do the thing. Because that's brave, right?
No. Wow, that's so cool. Yes.
Right. That's not brave.
No question.
Brave,
yes.
And when we're throwing that around, when we're throwing that definition of brave around, we are only honoring one kind of brave, which is this loud, bold, daring, sometimes reckless brave. But in that situation, what I would say is that both girls, Emma and Tish, were incredibly brave because Emma looked inside herself, wanted something desperately, and did what it took, used her voice on the outside, did what it took to get the thing she wanted. Tish looked inside herself, found a voice that said, no, I'm not ready. Then was brave enough to use that voice on the outside to get what she wanted. And I would suggest that Tish was braver in that situation because sometimes it takes even more courage to say the thing that's not going to get you the applause and the approval on the outside.
Absolutely. Sure. No question. It's particularly in that moment when all these other moms are saying, come on, you got it. Do it.
And that happens to us so often.
All the time.
When I found out about, within Love Warrior, when I found out about Craig's infidelity in my marriage, I was a fierce feminist. I'm a woman who's out there leading women. There were so many voices coming at me saying the only thing that you should do as a feminist leader is to leave. And I knew I didn't I had this knowing inside of myself that it wasn't time, that we had some unfinished business to take care of, that we had to work. For me, my knowing said, I need to figure out how to forgive this man because I cannot spend the rest of my life hating him because we have these children together now. We did that work. We did it not to stay together happily ever after. It ends up we did it so that we could part and raise our children respectfully ever after, right?
Yes.
But I had to allow myself to be called a coward on the outside. However, I was doing the brave thing because I had a knowing inside and I was following that on the outside, regardless of what everybody else told me. So what I told Tish that night when we talked about what had happened at that ear piercing kiosk is that what I want her to think about every day is the word confidence, right? Everybody will have a different definition of brave. Our family has one, which is brave is listening to the knowing on the inside and speaking that knowing and acting that knowing on the outside. But I also love the word confidence. And confidence comes from, two Greek, the Latin origins of those words are with fidelity, confid, with fidelity.
Oh, wow.
And so what I think a confident person does is they live their lives one next right thing at a time with fidelity to self, right? They abandon else's expectations of them so that they never have to abandon themselves.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, but it's hard, but it's simple.
Right. And I love how you've broken down brave. And my husband and I have 3 daughters. And so the way that you just broke that down and made it so real, connecting it to confidence, I love it. I love it. Let me ask you this. How can you become, so there may be people listening, right? How can you become attuned to kind of our discontent? You know what I mean? Like, I think sometimes it's hard to know, like some people could be listening going, but like, I'm happy. Like, I feel good. Like, I'm not sure what you're doing. How do you uncover that? And how do you coach people to do that?
Well, first of all, if people are listening and they're like, what are you talking about? Everything's amazing. I feel great. I have no discontent. I mean, awesome. Like, awesome to you. Carry on.
Carry on,
right? Exactly. I believe that discontent, which can be called anything inside of women. I mean, you could call anger discontent, you could call sadness discontent, you could call envy discontent. What I believe is that discontent inside of women, we have been tamed by our culture to be ashamed of it. Okay. So that is the case for all marginalized groups, right? So we look at anger. It is very important for status quo to tame every marginalized group into being ashamed of our anger, right? It's very important for women, use women as an example. We have been tamed into every time we feel angry, we think there is something wrong with us, right? Instead of considering that maybe we're angry because there's just something wrong out there.
Right.
That we might be able to show up and change, okay? Whether that thing is in our relationship, whether that thing is in our family, whether it's in our community, whether it's in our nation, right? So the reason why we are tamed into being ashamed of our anger is because angry people demand change. So any group who has ever made any change in the world is because they were pissed first.
They were angry. Sure.
Of course. Right. So, and this taming comes from every place. It's girls shouldn't be angry, like smile more, like all of the things that we are taught that girls should be pleasant, that girls should be grateful. I mean, we are not allowed to admit our discontent because a good girl is grateful, right? Be grateful for what you have. I mean, the first lesson I ever learned about women was Adam and Eve. You be grateful for what you have. If you go for more, you will destroy the world and all of your descendants will suffer forever. Amen. Go with God, girls, right? So what I think that if everything is awesome for you, fantastic, carry on. If you do have anger, if you do have discontent, if you do want more, consider who's benefiting from you being ashamed of those feelings instead of being motivated by those feelings. And the people who benefit from women being ashamed of their ambition and ashamed of their anger and ashamed of their discontent is always power.
Well, and if you're staying in it, right? I've always heard people, if you're staying in it, it's serving you somehow, right? If you're staying in something, if you're staying in that anger, it's serving you because maybe you're not having to have the courage, have the freedom lean into the confidence that probably is inside of and hope, is inside of all of us. Finding it,
Yeah, and
unlocking
it's
it.
scary.
No
It's
question.
so scary. And once you admit that you're discontent, like it's very hard to admit to ourselves that we're discontent, because then it's admitting that we can imagine more for ourselves. And that's terrifying, because then we have to say things that might make people uncomfortable, might challenge, the status quo of our relationships, of our marriages, of our families. Like, it's scary to admit that we want more.
We'll get right back to the show, but first, I want to share with you a free video series that I created just for you. Too often, we assume that our potential is some lofty vision hanging over our heads, but never quite attainable. But in reality, our potential is built in small moments. A pro athlete delivers a clutch performance in the biggest games because he executed it 1,000 times in practice. The same goes for you. Master the little moments so you're ready for the big moments. My free Unleash Your Potential video series walks you through 3 simple steps to move closer to what you really are capable of. To get free access, visit 5minutepotential.com. That's 5minutepotential.com. One of the themes I noticed you talk about a lot in Untamed, or it was sort of threaded through, is, and you sort of talk about the fear of being too much.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about that. Talk about that.
I mean, the amount of women that tell me that this is what they fear, what they've been told, that they're too much, is so incredible. It's so many women. And of course, because all the women have to be too much or not enough, right? Like,
it's one or the other.
What the hell does that even mean? What does that mean? What is this muchness by which we are all being graded? Like, what is the appropriate amount of muchness for a woman? Is it 60 kilograms of muchness? Like, what's the appropriate amount? It's so ridiculous. I believed this as a kid. I was a super sensitive kid, and I had big feelings, I had big anger, big questions, big doubt. And I just was kind of tamed by my culture, my family, everybody, into just, this is too much. And that's why I started binge eating and became addicted to food as a numbing agent. And that turned into alcoholism, and that turned into everything else. And my life for 25 years became, doctors and therapists and diagnoses and medicine and a mental hospital once. And, my underlying belief about myself became, I'm crazy. And so I stopped trusting myself, because, how can a crazy person be trusted to not sabotage her life and her people? But I am now raising a little girl, Tish, who is super sensitive. She is big feelings and big anger and big all the things because of karma, Molly. Because of karma.
Right. Karma's real, girl.
Yes, it is. Hard and freaking beautiful to raise this kid. And I look at her all the time, and she's so amazing. I think she cares so much about everything, and she feels deeply. She's like a little prophet. She feels things that other people aren't willing to feel, and she can see things and hear things that other people can't. And it makes her life a little bit hard. But it makes her really special. And I look at her and I think, oh, not in a million years did I ever call her crazy or broken. She is sensitive, and that's her superpower, right? And she's prophetic. And so that it just has helped me revise my own ideas about myself as a child, right? Of course I wasn't broken. Of course I wasn't too much. Of course I wasn't crazy. I was just a highly sensitive kid who didn't have the tools that she needed to deal with her sensitivity. And now, look, the sensitivity that led me to numb myself inside of food is the exact same sensitivity that I use now to be a really good writer. And the anxiety, well, I call it my fire, but my therapist calls it my anxiety, whatever. But
I like that pivot. That's a nice pivot.
Yes. There. But that fire that led me into being a really fearful person is the same fire that makes me a really good activist. So it's like this too muchness, whatever this thing is that women are so afraid we have, that's the gift, right? That's not what you numb. That's not what you hide. That's what you lean into. That's what you bring to the world. That's your magic.
Well, and you say in the book, I love it that you steal permission from women to exist fully, right? When we pretend to be less than.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I tell you, Tish is one lucky girl, blessed girl to have. I mean, because obviously you are positioned incredibly well to help her navigate her sensitivity. There's no doubt about that. That's awesome.
Molly, don't you think we just pendulum parent, though? I feel like I've overdone it. Sometimes Tish is on her 6th hour of telling me how she feels. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I forgot to tell you about the gifts of suffering silently, sister.
Mama's tired. Mama's tired.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. One of the things, you talk about motherhood and you talk about how we identify ourselves in our roles in life, right? Like mother and wife or sister or friend or, activist, right? But you talk about how when we do that who we are can be taken from us and how we can think about identity. So, because we play these, quote unquote roles, right? In our lives at some level, right? But how can we delineate that and think about these in a healthy way?
Yeah, it's so interesting. This is so weird, this analogy that I just thought of. But when you were talking, I was thinking about, have you seen the movie A League of Their Own? Of course.
Yes. Sure.
When the sisters are standing on the platform at the train station and they don't know how to get on the train,
Mm-hmm.
and the Tom Hanks is like, see the way. Oh no, it's the manager guy. He goes, see, the way it works is the train moves, not the station. Like. That is how I think about women in our roles. It's like we are taught to define ourselves by these roles. So you ask a woman who she is, and she will say, I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a. And the thing is that these roles change and they can be taken from us. And so if we put our entire identity in mother, what happens when they go to college? Or if we put our identity in wife, what happens when the marriage ends? It's like how it works is the train moves, not the station. Like we have to find identity in our souls instead of our roles, which sounds nice because it rhymes, but like it's hard. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love writing so much, because when I write words on a blank page, I look at that and it feels more to me like I'm looking in a mirror than even when I'm looking in a mirror.
Wow.
Right? That's the there she is for me. Right? The there she is from the book always to me in the end means the there she is was me, right? The self rising up inside of me that I could finally hear from, the there she is was me. And so at different points in women's lives, it's so hard to find any time to do that, to have a moment. Virginia Woolf said that every woman needs a room of her own, but I write in the closet. Like I feel like what women need is an hour of their own, just like some place or some time or somebody with whom you can just be your full self, where you just stop feeling like you're on stage and you're backstage,
Sure.
where you can just say, there she is.
And would you say for some women it's an hour, but for some it could be 2, and it could be, it's different for everybody though, right?
Absolutely. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 8 hours. It can be whatever. I don't know I don't know. I had, when I was just dripping with children, I had barely a minute. I felt like I was just, so overwhelmed with touch and presence. And I'm a major introvert, and that was a really hard time for me. And I just remember the only minutes I had was just like sneaking into the bathroom.
Oh, dude, it's like the shower. My husband and I we had 3 kids in 12 months.
Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Yeah, exactly. So we had one, and then 12 months later, I had twins. And so I would find myself taking like 3 showers a day because it was the only thing I could do and be alone by myself without somebody clawing at the, shower door. Though sometimes they would find themselves there, but you know that story. But
oh, I sure do. And Molly, you know what? My kids think that the shower is a magical place. Like my kids, one of them, I don't remember, came to me and said, "Mommy, this crazy thing happens to me in the shower. I have so many ideas there." It's like this magical place where I have so many ideas. And I said, honey, the shower is not magic. It's just the only place where you're not freaking looking at a screen.
Exactly.
Right? It's like
So
this
true.
crazy thing happens in the shower. It's called thinking. It's what we had before Google.
Right. Oh, amen, girl. That is so true. That is so true. So you talk a lot about, and we kind of come back to this sort of knowing, right? Like knowing with a capital K, right? Like, so learning to trust your own intuition, and not just you, but all of us, right, is so hard. But how did you learn to do that? Because you clearly trust your intuition, and you're raising your children to trust their intuition. And
I do.
yeah. How did you get that, and how do you teach people to get that?
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to get on an intellectual level that if you don't trust you're always trusting somebody's intuition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
That's true. Yeah,
You're
sure.
either trusting your own or somebody else, because you're either doing what you know to do or you are outsourcing your decisions to somebody else, right? So there's a choice either way. And I think you have to intellectually understand on a certain level that if you're not trusting your intuition, then most likely you're trusting cultural directives. Okay. Because when you think about what you should do or what you're supposed to do, here's an example. When I gave you the story about the infidelity, what should I do? Okay, well, back then I was a feminist and I was in the Christian space. Okay, these are two tricky Venn diagram there. Okay, so one, all of the Christian world would have told me you should stay. Back then, that was like a good woman should stay. The right thing to do, that the feminists would tell me, the right thing to do is to go. Okay, this is important to have an experience like that where you realize you cannot make everybody happy. And in a situation like that, you learn that the right thing and the should thing are always relative. There is no right thing. There is no should. These are all culturally constructed ideas by certain groups to keep people in the herd, to keep people in line. So they're not pure, right? They're not pure. If you are not following your own instincts, you are following someone else's should. Okay, you are following somebody else's map, but there is no map. We are all pioneers, right? So no one's ever lived the particular life that I'm living with my gifts, my past, my pain, my people, right? Every life is an unprecedented experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to live the one wild and precious life that you were meant to live, the only way to do it is one step at a time, leaning on your intuition instead of other people's maps. And what happens is after a while, it feels scary, but it's not. It's much less scary than outsourcing your life to other people, many of whom are just trying to control you. And it's a practice. It's a practice of giving yourself some time to shut out all the other voices outside in the exterior and practicing. I don't have a better word than listening, but it's not a voice for me. It's more like feeling around for the intuition. It kind of feels like a nudge toward one thing or another. I have a friend who describes it as what feels warm, what feels cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting back to that instinctual part of ourselves, but it's also highly spiritual. It's depending on your imagination, your emotion, all of these things that women have been shamed out of. And it's using what's inside as a blueprint for what you're building outside.
Mm-hmm. And the more you practiced it, did you get better at trusting it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I'm a person who I started practicing this because I found myself at 3 a.m. sitting in bed with a pint of half-baked Ben & Jerry's, an open computer, Googling, what do I do if my husband cheats on me but is a good dad? Okay? Molly, I was Googling my one wild and precious life. Okay?
Oh,
that
man.
is rock
Sure.
bottom.
Yeah.
That is rock bottom
Yeah.
of trusting yourself, right? I would outsource my life to a bunch of bots and trolls instead of going inside and trusting myself. So when I tell you can start from anywhere.
Yeah. You can start from bed with a thing of half baked and a Google, man, and you can go from there.
Right. That's right.
Wow. That's awesome. Let me ask you, what have you learned about forgiveness over the years in all that you've done and experienced?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I would say that forgiveness is real tricky for me. It's not like it's circular. It's not linear. It's not, yes, I do all of these things and I am done with forgiveness now. And I have forgiven this person and now it's over. And it's a spiral staircase for me. It's like a decision over and over again. And I keep coming back to it and I keep coming back to it. And sometimes I feel unforgiveness again. And that's okay. I have learned that forgiveness does not mean access, right? So with my ex-husband, I felt like I was waiting for forgiveness. Like I was doing all the right things. I was going to therapy. I was trying. I was, showing up. And it just didn't come. And it was like I was waiting for forgiveness to be bestowed upon me from on high. And we both were. And what I realized was that what I really needed to do in order to raise my children with Craig for the rest of our lives was to forgive Craig. And what I really needed to do to forgive Craig was to get divorced because I did not feel safe. Right? I could not forgive Craig because I had not done the hard work of restoring boundaries that had been broken, of making myself feel safe again. That is what I needed to do. And so a very interesting thing that happened to me is after we signed our divorce papers, we were going up an elevator together from the mediator person's office. And I looked over at Craig and it was the first time that I felt true tenderness, love, friendship in years. And I realized, I forgive him now because I have made myself safe again.
Wow. Interesting. Sure. And so when you say it's circular, so in that elevator, you felt that way, but it sounds like from what I've read and you still feel that way, right? Because you're still in this safe place. And is that how you do that in life, right? You kind of get yourself to a safe place that allows you to let go?
Yeah, I think you restore your boundary. You do what it takes you honor yourself. Like I remember thinking, my problem is not that you abandoned me, Craig. My problem is that I keep abandoning myself because I'm not doing what I need to do to honor myself and to make myself feel safe now. Having said that, I can give you that definition of forgiveness. I can tell you I had that elevator moment. And I can also tell you that every once in a while, Craig and I want to stab each other.
Right.
Okay?
Sure.
Okay?
Right.
We're not in constant kumbaya. It's not like that elevator moment is the nirvana that we have now live inside of. That's what I mean by circular,
right,
the spiral staircase. It's that we will keep forever running into unforgiveness. And we will keep going and we will work our way back to forgiveness and then unforgiveness and then back forgiveness. And I can tell you right now that we spend a lot more time in forgiveness than we did in the beginning. I think that spiral staircase gets wider and wider and wider.
It's one thing, right, to face sort of public, commentary about our decisions. But it's a real different thing, I think, when we're afraid to disappoint the people that we love,
Oh, of course. That's it.
Yeah. And so what has been your experience with that? Because you've been there, right, as far as navigating that. What's been that for you?
Yeah. Well, I told you about Tish. That or my kids, having to disappoint them in order to stay, to not abandon myself. That was a toughie. My parents, listen, you can think you're a badass. You can think you're untamed until you got to call your mama, right? And tell her that you're divorcing their, good God. So no, that's what mattered to me. The world will do. A woman steps out of line like I do. I knew what the world was going to do. There was going to be some moments. And I was ready for that because I know what happens when women step outside of their cages. No, what mattered was one at a time, abandoning expectations of the people who love us is the hardest part. It's not, the cruel criticism of people who hate us that shakes us from our knowing. It's always the quiet concern of those who love us. So to trust yourself, to be a woman who trusts herself to lead her own life often means abandoning the idea that your parents know best, that it's your job to protect everyone from discomfort, right? It's boldly deciding, actually, I trust myself to lead my own life. Like the best way to honor our parents is to trust completely the women they raised, ourselves. Every generation is made for a different world. Like if we're not doing anything our parents don't understand, then we are probably not stepping into the lives we're supposed to.
Sure, we're not evolving. We're not growing.
Absolutely. And if our children are not doing anything that we don't understand, then they probably are not. Like we should. That conflict should rub up against each other.
I've got to go Together Rising. I mean, you've raised more than $25 million for people in need, right? I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why it exists, right? And how can people support you on this mission?
Yeah, I mean, Together Rising exists. It's a bridge. It's a bridge between, warriors in their homes who refuse to, succumb to apathy and despair about the pain in our communities, in our world. And it connects those people in their homes to the warriors on the ground who are serving, who are leading, who are in the fight and have been forever to protect our most marginalized and vulnerable groups, women, children, all. It's the great honor of my life, the joy of my life, and the beauty of Together Rising is that we have, that $25 million you mentioned, the average donation is $28.
I've heard you say that, which is, grassroots.
It's just wild. And it's just proof that we don't have to do big things. We just do small things connected with other people who care. And Together Rising is the leading American organization reuniting families at the border. Together Rising is one of the leading organizations in the Syrian refugee crisis and in the LGBTQ homeless just freaking mess that we have in America because of all of the shame that religious organizations are pumping into their families. And it's people who care in their homes, who are just doing their little part. It's the idea that we cannot allow the fact that we can't do everything keep us from doing what we can do, right? And so that's what it is. It's just warriors and warriors, love warriors, all connecting and just making a difference in the world.
And how do people find out about it and support you?
So go to togetherrising.org. I mean, or go to my Glennon Doyle on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter, but I suck at Twitter. So Instagram is.
And your Instagram is just, I mean, there's nothing better than pouring a glass of wine and just jumping on your Instagram, girl. I mean, it's pure entertainment. It's pure entertainment. I love it. I love it. It's my home. It's good stuff. I know.
Yeah. So hang out with us there. I mean, they're being ridiculous.
So one of your mantras is, and I love this one, we can do hard things. How do you return to that in your own life, right? Like, and you live this for sure, but I love this. We can do hard things. I've actually said this to my daughters several times, and I just think it's a great line. I think it's a great belief.
Yeah, that's been a mantra of mine since I was getting sober. So that was 17 years ago, and I was teaching, and everything was terrible and hard and scary. And my friend Josie taught next door to me, and she had a sign in her classroom that said, "We can do hard things." And I used to just stare at it every day. It's what got me through early sobriety. And there's something about it that, to me, there's two important parts of that mantra. One is, life is hard. Life is really hard for me. And I'm not even talking about when extra hard things happen. I'm just talking about just generally being human, right? And making it through an ordinary day with feelings and people and I don't like it when people try to pretend that it's easy. Right? There's something like when it's suggested to us a million times a day from whether it's social media or commercials or whatever, that, life is actually easy. And if you're experiencing pain, you're just doing it wrong. It's not true, right? It's just how people sell things. It's not true. Life is really hard for everybody. And what I've come to learn is that life is often hardest, not for people who are doing it wrong, but for people who are doing it really right. Right? For people who are showing up and being vulnerable and trying and failing and trying again. And so there's something in that mantra that it's not the idea of like, just suck it up, life is easy. It's just this idea of no, it's all hard. And this idea of like the we. I sometimes people change it to I can do hard things, and I'm always like, oh,
right, because it's a we thing. We need others to do it. Sure,
exactly.
Yeah,
and sometimes even when we're alone, even when we have to do that hard thing alone, the we is this idea that it's life can be a solo. It can be sometimes a solo experience, but it's collective also. We're doing our hard things individually alongside the rest of the world who are all doing their hard things individually. So it's this idea that even when we are alone, we are never alone, right? It's a we.
Plus you have people that love you that are right there behind you, supporting you.
Yeah.
For sure. And I love how you talk about we got to feel the pain, that pain isn't a bad thing. Feel it, stay in it, that's living, that's life, right?
That's right. I am so over the whole like be happy all the time thing. I don't know about that. Like I just am done. I just feel I'm not trying to be happy all the time, right? I just want to feel alive. I don't think life is about feeling happy. I think life is about feeling everything.
I've heard you say that. I love that. Glennon, you have been so incredibly generous with your time. We end with rapid fire. So I am going to hit you with some quick questions and you just go, girl. Okay. So one word to describe yourself.
Alive.
And Untamed, maybe? Hence the new book title.
But my publisher would be more happy if I said Untamed. Yes.
But we don't do what other people tell us to do. We do what we want to do, right?
That's right, damn it.
Yeah,
That's
girl.
Right.
All right. So a book that changed your life.
Probably Traveling Mercies early on helped me get sober by Anne Lamott.
Awesome. Person you would most like to meet?
I was just saying this to Abby. Who the hell was it? I feel like asking her right now. I'm looking forward to, I'll say Michelle Obama. I'm really looking forward to meeting Michelle Obama.
Are you meeting her soon?
No.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I just expect to.
I
just expect great miracles all the time.
There you go. The last show you binge watch with a pint of half-baked.
Okay, so we just watched the Hillary documentary, one after another. It was fantastic. And then I'm super, super ashamed to tell you that we just binge watched all of Love is Blind.
That's awesome.
Because when we go low and we go high.
I think I saw that on your story or something. I think I saw it. that.
Abby sold me out.
Yeah, you were snacking in the kitchen and she was summoning you to that. What's the last time you cried?
Oh God. I was just reading this review of Untamed on Amazon, and this woman was writing about how the book had cracked her open and she was crying more, but she was laughing more. And she said that she started laughing and her 5-year-old had not heard her laugh for so long. And her 5-year-old said, "Mommy, it's so good to hear you laugh. It's like getting a toy."
Oh.
And I just lost it. I just lost it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. That's why you do what you do right there, girl.
Yes.
What's your biggest fear?
Oh, God. Losing one of my kids.
What's your greatest joy?
My kids and my wife and my sister. Just the freaking women that surround me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And Chase. Yeah.
One thing you cannot live without.
Books and coffee.
There we go. One thing on your bucket list.
Let me just tell you real quick. Like somebody said recently, like, what's your dream for Untamed? And I'm not good. I'm such a next right thing person that I'm not good at this like projection thing. Like I can't tell you, Molly, like I am a person who less than a decade and a half ago was like almost dead, right? Like I was close to like, I was so sick and I was so addicted. And, you know, at my first book signing, and a reporter came up to my dad and said, and this is in an article, she said, "Are you so proud of your daughter?" And he said, "We're just so happy she's not in jail."
Wow.
And like, that's how I feel every day. I can't believe that I have this family and this wife and this community and this writing career and this world. Like, I am living my bucket list right now. There's no other thing.
That's
I just
cool.
want, finally in my life, I just want more of the same. I don't want anything different.
Wow. Good for you. That's awesome. Congratulations. That's awesome. So last question. The show is called Game Changer. So one last question. What game changer, like who, inspires you and why?
Okay, so I'm completely and fully obsessed with the women's national soccer team. And
I mean, this has nothing to do with who your wife is.
listen to me, it's not.
Okay.
I am way more obsessed with this team than Abby is. I am telling you, I did not have models like this growing up. And when Abby introduced me to this team and I watched their ferocity and their excellence and their skill on the field and the way that to watch women using their bodies to compete instead of perform and pose, and like then I started learning about their activism and the way that they are just like challenging US soccer and challenging FIFA and taking on this huge mantle of women's equality. I mean, I am like Abby, I was, just doing my freak out one night, and I said to her, I will do whatever it takes for the rest of my life to support this team. This is my new goal. Like, you don't understand. And Abby was like, I feel like I do understand, babe. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I really feel like, she's like, that I played with them. Like, I did the thing that you are discovering right now. Like,
and was pretty darn good.
Pretty good. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm
That's
so
awesome.
inspired by them. I just love them so much. And I just want them in front of everybody. I want them in front of every little girl and every little boy. And I want them to be the new model of what's possible.
Well, I was fortunate enough to have Carly Lloyd on, and what a class act. I mean, what a complete class act. Super cool. Super special. Yeah. Hey, Glennon, keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, girl. The world needs more of you. The world needs more of you. Thank you.
Same, Molly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, as always, for listening to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts. There you can listen to previous episodes and leave us a review, which helps other people find out about the show. For more about me, visit mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.